Right, we're going to call this the tissue tree. This is the big tree that we have in our painting. And we're going to put the foliage on with bits of tissue. Now, I'm going to show you my bits of tissue because people get a bit, see, it's bits of dirty tissue. It is slightly damp, but these are the bits that I'm going to use to create the tree in a minute. Now, I've drawn in very dark in pencil my tree, but you can see I've left loads of holes, like here and up here and here in the trunk and the branches. This is because I don't want to fight with pencil lines when I come to put the foliage in. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to damp down the bulk. Now, I haven't drawn any of the little twiggly branches, nothing like that. All I've got is the main big limbs. So this works brilliantly for the bigger trees. If you want to do little squiggly trees, not so much maybe. Although I manage. That's the easiest way I can put it. So I'm just going in, I'm damping this down. Again, you don't want it soaking. All I'm doing is damping this down enough so that when I put the base colour for my trunk on, then I'm not going to be fighting against dry paper. So I'm just putting this in quite roughly. This is just the base colour for the trunk. This is not what it's going to look like in the end. This is just the now. And it will help you to, one, make sure that you know where your tree is, which sounds daft at the moment, but it won't when we get a little bit further on. And two, it does give you a good base for when you come to put the rest on. I'm using a very watered down mix of burnt sienna, which is a reddish brown. Again, depending on your trees, depending on loads of things, but you may want to use a watery or mixed down version of something else. So I've got that on, and now I'm going to go into my dirty bits of tissue. Now, this will be, so I've damped it down, squished it out, and this is what it looks like, okay? So when I squish it up, I don't want to squish it into a hard, again, some hard ball or something. You don't want it too wet, but you just want it to be quite squishy and quite soft. So I'm going straight in on the lemon yellow, and I'm going straight away going to take it across these spaces that I've left. So before we do anything else, that's the first thing I'm going to do, is look at these spaces that I've left and make sure that I take it all the way across them. Now, the tissue does drink the paint, so you'll need to make far more than you think would be necessary. That's the best way I can say it. Don't be stingy. Make a lot more paint than you think you're going to need, because you would be surprised how much you will get through even doing a small area. So before this is dry, I'm just going to go in across lots of these areas with my bit of squished up tissue. Everywhere that I've left spaces in the trunk, I'm going over with the squished up tissue to get some basic impression of foliage, keeping it nice and light and letting the tissue just bounce about all over. And because the paper was damp to start with, and that brown was damp, it's sort of half mixed itself as it's gone along. So we've got that in. Before that gets any drier, I'm going to go back in. I'm just going to use the same bit of squished up tissue. I'm just changing its shape slightly. So I'm going back in with my sap green and allowing that to feed all over it. Again, it's that light movement. Don't get heavy with it. Keep it nice and light. It wants to travel nice and quickly across the paper. I'm not trying to cover all the yellow either. I'm just basically going around the same areas because that's where I've left the spaces. So I'm not trying to cover everything else up. Ideally what you want is to see a lot of these colours showing through together. Now, as I say, my pencil lines for this are very dark compared to what I would normally have on here. So that was my second mixed colour. My first was the lemon yellow. My second is the sap green. Now I'm going into that sagey green that I mix. That is the sap green with some burnt sienna or burnt umber. I've used burnt sienna in it. So it gives you this nice sort of, it's quite a nice natural, more sagey green than sharp green. I do like the sap green. Not everybody does. If you don't like it, you can naturalize it with a little bit of red, or as I do, the burnt sienna. So we've got that in. Doesn't look too bad. So I'm going straight from that into my dark green. Now I am going to be a bit more picky with the dark green, because the dark green really wants to be on the underneath side more than on the top. So all I'm doing is squishing my bit of yoki tissue so that I've got an edge that makes it easier for me to choose where to put it. And I'm looking more at the underside of the foliage rather than on the top, so that ultimately it looks like, gives it more of a 3D effect, but it then shows the sunlight on the top of the leaves, and where you've got more of a shadow, like here on the trunk, there would be far more shadow, or it would be casting shadow as well as in shadow. And down here probably a lot darker coming through this. So I am just putting in a few of these bits right now. And we're going to call that done for now. You notice I said for now, not indefinitely. So before that gets any drier, I'm going to go in now with a little bit of my burnt umber this time. So, and I'm going to allow this to touch on the underside of my foliage, so I'm not separating it. It's going to touch on, and then I'm going to drop in just a little bit of the grey down this right hand side. So it's burnt, again, not a massively thick mix. We've already got one layer of paint on, and then down this side I'm dropping in some of the some of the grey. And up here where I might have some shadows, I'm going to drop some in, and then I'm going to let that sort of do its own thing and dry. And I'm going to work my way up the tree like that, but I'm not separating everything. So I'm overlapping, or I'm going into the edge of that foliage that I've put in, and then I'm using the grey on the underside, just here and there, just to create some differentiation in the trunk and everything. So there we go, just let them blend in. It will hit and blend in with the greens and the yellows, and that's absolutely fine. So here, before that dries off too much, just go in, catch underneath the edges of those. Just going to put some of the darks in where I think you'd find them on the tree naturally. And yes, this is quite quick. You do need to keep moseying along. So just a little bit of the darks in here. Darken that down a little bit. Soften it back. And you can see that in between the foliage now, you can see the trunk. So here, just a little bit of the brown coming into that bit. And this tree is, I think it's completely dry now. Some of the foliage is just allowing it to mix back in on itself. There we go, a little bit down there. We'll put a little bit in here. So and it just gives it enough character, so I'm quite happy with how that's looking. So the next thing would be, if you want to, it's up to you. Next thing would be, I'm using the grey with a little bit of the burnt umber in it. So it's more on the burnt umber side than the black or the grey. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to choose where I'm going to show some branches. So I've got some foliage here. So it needs to, basically you want to house it. So I'm going to take a branch up off there and pull a little bit through here. So just go behind it and soften that edge in there. That's better. And then I might have another little branch that's here that's holding this foliage on. There's bound to be some little twiggy branches coming up here. So all I'm doing now is looking at some of the spaces between the foliage and putting some branches in on them, so that more than anything we feel comfortable with what we're seeing. So here's a nice spot. Let's take one from there and bring it up here, and then maybe that could curl down here and here. So as you're going, you need to look at what you've created and decide where you think the branches would be coming and going from. And yes, it can take a little bit of time, but it is worth the effort. So here I've got my thick branch, so I'm going to assume that it goes up here and it just gets thinner as it comes along. Here. And suddenly all these things make sense and they belong to the tree rather than they're floating out in thin air. I'm going to put a foreshortened branch in here just to make that feel a little bit more comfortable. Maybe a couple of little views of it there. And then down here we've got all this, so that could be coming from here. And maybe some coming up here. So I've already got what could be a branch here, so I'm just going to use it. Same across here, just pull a few little spiky branches sticking out. This obviously is a foreshortened branch that you can't really see down here. So by the time I get to the end of this, it'll look like a very comfortable tree. It's grown into himself. So all I'm doing, just picking out a few of these places. Some of these branches, they've got to come and go from somewhere. And we don't need to have each individual branch on show, but it does make it more comfortable if your eye has got something to pick out and follow. So nearly So I'm just going to pull something through there, through there. Right, and then anywhere, damp brush, slight bit of burnt sienna on it. Just going to pull some texturing in. So this is almost almost a dry brush, but not quite. I'm just pulling a little bit of texture, especially where I've added in these branches. You can change to a smaller brush if you need to. That's not a problem. But this one holds its own, so I'm quite happy to work with it. Remember, it's a tree, so it's not smooth. It's not meant to be smooth. It's a bit more dark under there. So I'm just pulling these textures down. So we are pretty much in dry brush mode. Bit more dark on that side, I think. And we'll call that done as well. Now, at this point, if you got to this point, you think, you know what, I feel like I need to add more foliage, then you can go back in and add a few more bits of foliage if you really want to. Just don't overdo it. And 99% of the time you'll feel like you want to add more lights. But if you add more lights, remember you also need to add more of the other greens as well, because if you only add lights, it won't make sense when it's done. I can see a little thing there that would actually annoy me quite a lot, so I'm going to go back and move him so that he's joined on there. Right, so call that one done. That's basically the big tree. Okay, folks, have fun.